Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan. It's not Spawn year, and it's day 17 of my comic review video day calendar. Hey, I am nearing the 20th episode of the show, and I still haven't dealt with anything that has Galactus in it. And as some of you guys know, Galactus is my favorite Marvel villain. I've always been kind of obsessed with the look and the idea of Galactus, and we haven't dealt with anything with him yet. This may not be the only time we do this year, so I thought I would go ahead and knock one out relatively early. This is Silver Surfer number 70. This comes out in 1992. So even though, once again, we're not talking about Spawn, we are in the year that Spawn first comes out. This is a long-running series that goes through the early 2000s, I think. It's at least 120, 130 issues. And this is another one of those characters and series specifically with this volume. This is volume 3 of Silver Surfer. You've got the original miniseries, or I guess maxi series, 12, 13 issues that I've read, but it's been years and years. And then volume 2 is like an issue. I don't even remember what that is. I was just looking at a list earlier and I was like, oh, volume 2 is one issue. What is that? It's not Silver Surfer Parable, I don't think. That's its own thing. And I like that quite a bit too. But then this is the monthly that goes on for a long, long time. And I believe Ron Mars has the longest run in this series. He is our writer here with art by MC Whitman, and Whitman is our guest penciler. He does more than an adequate job. I think he's quite good here. If you told me that he was the regular penciler, I'd say, okay, cool. I would read more with this guy, but the regular artist on this book is Ron Lim. So a couple of Rons, kind of like They Might Be Giants, is a couple of Johns. And again, I really need to look at more of this book. I guess I say that a lot, looking at stuff from my collection with the show, and it's been, I don't know, a tad embarrassing, to be honest with you, all the stuff that I've collected for a long time, but have never cracked open and taken a look at. I always used to be much more of a collector than I was a reader, where I would just kind of check into things here and there, and I would read more about comics than I would actually read comics. I kind of had that with video games also, and then for 10, 11 years, I was reading current, and that it didn't flip. I mean, I was still collecting a lot, but I was reading most of everything I was buying. And I've always said that I have probably read maybe 10% of my collection. And at this point, that can't be true. It's got to be less than that. It's probably more like 5. And so when I started this series, I was thinking that there would be a lot of going back to old issues that I read when I was a kid that I haven't looked at in a long time. And yeah, there's been some of that, but more of it has been, oh, here's an issue that I like the cover of, or that I have had in my possession for a long time and I've never actually cracked open, never taken a look at. I grabbed this one in particular just because it had a cool Galactus cover, because I haven't read enough stuff with Nova, and she's on the cover and a prominent major character. This issue is actually a lot more about her than it is Silver Surfer. He's actually very much in the background so far of his own series. I suspect he'll be more front and center after this with this arc, and this certainly did compel me to read forward. So just like with our Green Arrow issue from yesterday and our Wolverine issue from the day before, I'm starting things that I'm, starting arcs that I'm not having a chance to finish right now, that I want to carve out a little bit of time and just for myself, just for my own edification, sit down and knock out and enjoy, and maybe, review the rest of down the road, or I don't know, just read and have looked at the thing. Nova, I know mostly from the short-lived, unfortunately canceled before its time, Silver Surfer cartoon from the late 90s, which I highly recommend. It still really holds up, and that is currently on Disney+. So we get the basic premise and a big revelation right on the cover. Spoiler alert, guys. Nova betrays Galactus, parentheses, at last. And I kind of like that "at last" because, first of all, I don't think we need those words. I think this cover is good enough to sell the issue, and it does feel like it's giving away this big major plot point. But then, to be fair, it was one of the things that made me want to look at this. It did kind of compel me to crack it open. So there's that, and at least it's not pretending like something happens on the in the issue that isn't really happening. I mean, all of this is certainly there. Well, I say all of this is there. I mean, Nova does betray Galactus. Uh, she doesn't go right up against him and fight him and shoot beams at him. She would lose that fight. It's not like the Rise of the Silver Surfer movie where Silver Surfer can defeat Galactus with lesser powers that Galactus gave him for no reason at all. But anyway, so this isn't, exactly what happens in the issue. But yes, Nova does indeed betray Galactus. And like I said, I like the at last because there's this idea brought forth here by Silver Surfer that anybody with half a brain, any or I should say any thinking and feeling person that winds up as the Herald of Galactus at some point inevitably will turn on Galactus, will become a defector, because what he's doing is horrible, and if you have any kind of a conscience, you can only serve evil for so long. And yes, he's a force of nature, and yes, he's just going to replace you with someone else, but how long can your emotions, how long can your sense of compassion withstand that? And the big idea here is that Galactus comes to finally realize that, and so he replaces Nova with a herald that doesn't have that problem, and that Galactus can respect, because his new herald is going to be a lot like him. And we'll get to that guy here in a minute. I love his name. There are a couple of subplots going on in the background here that are either holdovers from the previous arc or just setting up things that we don't yet know what the whole thing is about, that I was a little bit lost with. So right away, there's a guy sitting in a chair in this big mansion, and he says, the only one I might be able to get to, the only one, and that relates in the transition into the next page where Nova says it's the only one, but I don't actually know what's going on with this here. And there's another subplot, I'll just get this out of the way, with Nebula, who's here with, I'm sure somebody in the comments will be able to tell me who this guy is, but some cosmic-looking guy who's not Drax or anybody. I don't know who this guy is. And they go to see this really super creepy alien doctor called Dr. Mandibus, and I'm fascinated to find out what's going on with that. That is very unsettling and unnerving, and he's got creepy claws, but I like the absurdity of this too, because he's got your typical like doctor light on his head, but he's also covered in blood, and so he's done some kind of surgery, or maybe he's a serial killer. Who knows? I don't know what's going on with this, but I certainly was interested to see more of that. So at some point I will. But the rest of the issue is very simple, and it's simply the cover. So Nova. Oh, by the way, look at how huge Galactus's chair is. Like, consider how large Galactus himself is and how big his spacecraft would have to be to hold him. So he's got these massive monitors. Like, I really appreciate Nova being in this panel so that I can get a sense of scale. That chair is huge. I just want to know what it weighs. But anyway, you've got Nova in space, kind of soul-searching, mulling over her morality and thinking, like, I don't know how much longer I can stand to serve Galactus. I want to leave, and there's a little, like, one-panel flashback where in a previous issue, Silver Surfer told her that if her conscience, her Jiminy Cricket tells her she needs to leave Galactus, that's what she should do. He says, you must follow where your conscience leads. Always let your conscience be your guide, kids. And she says, yeah, but that's complicated. She says, it's just so hard to find the strength to do what's right. And immediately she's real sympathetic with that. She's in the same place that Silver Surfer was when he decided to finally leave Galactus, and instead of just straight away trying to go up against him and, fight him like a crazy person like she does on the cover, sells issues, folks. She decides that she's going to try to trick Galactus into not eating the most recent planet that she's found. I almost said Class M planet, but effectively, like in Star Trek terms, a populated planet with a civilization and a lot of life on it. And so he sends her out, and she goes and finds planets and hopes that he won't realize that she found something that would work for him. And she says, oh yeah, I was out there. She's a horrible liar, by the way. She's really bad at this. She says, we're gonna have to, I didn't find a planet for you, Galactus. We're gonna have to leave. She says, I guess. I like the smaller word, like she says it under her breath, I guess. And Galactus just says, you're lying. And he says that he is not going to abide her deception and her defiance, of course. And so he decides to put her in a Superman 2 like kind of Phantom Zone mirror while he goes off to the planet that she found because and eat it. And he's been monitoring the planets that she's gone to because of course he would do that. Of course he would have surveillance on her. And then it kind of begs the question, and I guess I've always wondered this, like things about Galactus break down a little bit when you start thinking about them too much. Like I like Galactus as an idea, and he's this godlike being. He's larger than life. He's kind of a walking or flying, if you want, contradiction anyway, which is one of the things that's so interesting about him. The notion that he thinks he's superior to most other life in the cosmos, and he can easily justify killing other beings, destroying life, destroying planets, because it keeps him alive. And if he didn't do that, then there would be no more Galactus, and we can't have that, right? Except all he is destruction. What is the point of Galactus existing? It's not like it's not even like the personification of death, where you need death to make sure that there's not overpopulation or anything. And I bet there's some place where Galactus even justifies it with that. But that's not what he says. It's always self-preservation. It's always, I am a superior being. I am essentially God. But he doesn't create anything. He's not adding to the universe. He's subtracting from it. So he thinks he's better than everyone else because of his power and his might. And yet he's not any different than you or I, or even animal species, in the sense that it's just about self-preservation. It's food chain. It's me versus you, and if it's, you know, if it's me versus you, I'm going to pick me. Is his thought process? It's like, how does that make you better than anyone just because you have all that power? He's not more enlightened than anything else. And so that's the inherent contradiction and the fascinating thing to me about Galactus, is that he's a force of nature that is driven entirely by self-preservation, entirely by hunger, and yet he believes that he is somehow better than anybody else. But it does kind of beg the question, why does he need a herald in the first place? Is it just because he's large and slow moving? Why he's got all this technology, he can't come up with a drone that he can just send out to find planets? I mean, obviously he wouldn't be as interesting if he didn't have a herald, because first of all, you just wouldn't have Silver Surfer in the first place. So all of this is here because we need it for the backstory for Silver Surfer. So retroactively, you unravel it and you start to realize that there's maybe not a ton of logic to it. It doesn't work as great in hindsight as compelling as Silver Surfer's origin is, and as compelling as Galactus's origin is. But you do have to wonder, like, why he can't just use his technology to find these things. But the idea that Galactus has to rely on one of these lesser beings in order to survive is also part of that contradiction that I find interesting. So Galactus goes to destroy this planet, to devour this world that Nova has found for him, and he runs into this man, and it's a little convenient. This is the only person he finds and talks to, this guy called Morg, which is a wonderful name for a supervillain that's going to serve essentially death, and who is kind of death himself. And Morg is not afraid of Galactus, and he's intrigued by that. And he says, all I care about is my own self-preservation. Does that sound familiar? And I like this page quite a bit, by the way, all the close-ups to Galactus's face, and there's some good visual storytelling here. Although you always got to wonder, does Galactus have to brush his teeth? Does he have like a giant toothbrush? I love Galactus. He's so wonderfully absurd. Anyway, so here comes Morg. He is court executioner, and he does not care what happens to his planet as long as he can keep himself going. And he says, if you have the power to do as I say, then I cannot stop you. So he's got this kind of nihilistic thing. There's nothing I can do about it. Nothing really means anything. I'm just going to do what I have to survive. I care not what happens to the world or to the people. My own existence is my only concern. Again, sounds familiar, right? So Galactus wouldn't admit this, but it seems like he's seeing something in this guy that reminds him of himself. And he says, and I love this line, it's my favorite bit in this issue, fearless, bloodthirsty, and completely amoral. A most useful combination. Galactus' favorite part is that the guy is amoral. And Galactus saves this guy because, and it's pretty clear right away what's going on, right? He's going to make him his herald. The only real issue I have with this issue, I gotta come up with better word choice. We're talking about comic issues, and I keep saying the word issue. The only problem that I have, the only criticism, really, that I have about this issue is just the convenience of immediately after Nova defects, or maybe that's not the right word, but goes up against Galactus, betrays Galactus, the very next person he finds, he decides is perfect to be his new herald and doesn't have compassion and thinks about the universe in the same way that Galactus does. I'm sure somewhere in the next 5 issues with this arc that's going to blow up in his face. I can kind of see how that would happen because he is loyal to Galactus right now because Galactus keeps him alive, and gives him power, but just to serve Galactus. And so he says, I have served someone else my entire life, various masters, and that's maybe the clue. And I've not read past this, of course, so I don't know if I'm right about this. But I'm thinking that maybe that's the clue as to what will be the downfall for this particular herald, where Galactus will have to go find somebody else yet again that he served different masters. If he finds somebody that he can trade up with, or if he gets to a place where serving Galactus is going to go against what he wants, which is keeping himself alive, then he won't do that anymore. I'm sure that that's one of those two things is what it will end up being. So Galactus devours this planet, and he releases Nova. And Nova says, wait, what do you mean I can go? It takes her out of the Phantom Zone glass. And for some reason, Galactus always lets his heralds hang on to the power cosmic. I don't know if there's this limited thing with Galactus where and I'm sure this is explained somewhere that I've not read, and leave a comment if you know this stuff better than I do. But does he have to, if he gives the power cosmic, if he gives cosmic awareness to someone, are they stuck with it? He can't take that back, like no take backs. Because they always hang on to it. Silver Surfer does, Nova does, the other heralds that are mentioned here, that had fatal flaws, fatal weaknesses. They all got to keep the power cosmic too, as far as I'm aware. Like Fire Lord and Terrax. I don't know if all these characters even survived, but like I'm sure if I would think that if Galactus had his druthers, if you betray him, he would not even let you live. So yeah, I've always kind of wondered about that. I need to read more Galactus and Silver Surfer stuff, obviously. So he lets Nova go and reveals that he's going to make Morg. What a wonderful name. His new herald, and she says, that psychopath, like really you're going to give him the power cosmic? And Galactus says, I am. It is past time I had a servant, pardon me, molded in my own image. So like the hubris of Galactus here, the godlike way he's speaking about himself. He's going to create his herald. He's going to create man in his own image. What could possibly go wrong? Unfettered by the moral shackles that bind and weaken the likes of you. I mean, Galactus, I think ultimately the problem is that you haven't figured out a way to just go look into planets yourself without needing to rely on mortals, because this guy is also going to have a fatal flaw, and it's not going to be compassion. So he gives this guy the power cosmic, and then Silver Surfer shows up looking for Nova, and Galactus is like, yeah, I fired her. I didn't even let her put in her 2 weeks. She's done. And meanwhile, I've got Morg, and Morg is about to go up against Silver Surfer, and we have a typical last panel of we're about to have a big fight, what's going to happen, and then that's our cliffhanger, and then the next issue is called Combustion. So yeah, I definitely want to read more of this, and this is right before the Infinity War event, which Silver Surfer is pretty heavily involved in, of course, and so a lot of big Silver Surfer stuff happening all at once here in the early 90s. But yeah, I enjoyed this one quite a bit, and am definitely going to finish this arc at some point. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody. Leave a comment, let me know if you've read this one, and if you can clear up any of my confusion and questions about the mythology here, and I'll see you again tomorrow with another one. I was Captain Logan, and as always, happy reading.